What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have quite a few things to discuss today, starting with the area of interest in the Gulf Coast, Florida, and the East Coast. A surprise tropical low, too, that might be developing in the Atlantic Basin, and the MDR as signs continue to show that the conditions are getting better and better, and more data is coming in. And since it's the 1st of July, we can kind of go over, okay, what's the next couple of weeks going to look like, and what's the outlook going to be going on moving forward. So with that being said, let's go ahead and dive right into it right here. And we'll go ahead and start with the NHC's latest advisory right here for this situation. We have a 30% chance of formation in the next 7 days. They've increased this to 30%, and this is part of the reason why near the southeastern U.S. Let's go ahead and read this out. A frontal boundary is expected to stall and weaken off the southeast U.S. coast late this week. An area of low pressure could develop off the weakening front by the weekend over the Atlantic waters off the southeastern United States, Florida, or the over the eastern Gulf. Some gradual tropical or subtropical development could occur thereafter as the low drifts and moves little. Regardless of development, heavy rainfall is possible across portions of the southeastern United States, particularly across portions of the southeastern, along the portions of the Florida coast, 30% chance of formation in the next 7 days. And taking a quick look at the surface analysis, let's go ahead and take a quick gander at that for you as well. So here's our surface analysis. This is the front right here, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be moving over parts of the Gulf Coast and weakening and stalling out. So you're going to want to take this very seriously and pay attention to this. This, I believe, is the low pressure system that this is attached to right here. This low, I believe, right here, currently over the Boot Heel of Missouri, parts of Kentucky, pretty much the mid-Mississippi Valley, is what's going to end up detaching and becoming the tropical low that we need to pay attention to right here. So that front right here is going to enter the Gulf region and the southeastern United States, as well as some parts of the area as well, and as on the Atlantic coast. And this front is going to detach. It's going to weaken, fall apart, and then this low is going to remain, and it's going to remain non-frontal. It's going to become tropical. And that's our situation right here. We can now look at this a lot more clearly now than we can yesterday and kind of diagnose, okay, where is this low pressure system coming from? Well, now we know where it is, and now we can kind of understand what we're looking at going forward. And taking a look at satellite imagery, you are noticing, too, some more convection firing off in the eastern Gulf over here. Let's go ahead and zoom in on this very quickly. Shifting over to the western Atlantic, you're noticing more convection starting to fire off across parts of the eastern coast, off the coast of Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. And we'll go ahead and zoom into the Gulf Coast as well, just that region, if we can find it very quickly, Gulf of Mexico. Here we go. So we're seeing more convection starting to burst up and starting to flare up across parts of Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. This I do not believe is is not part of the front or anything like that, or the low pressure system, but there is a possibility that this convection, if it remains there and the low starts to move in, could start to kind of allow for the low pressure system to start to organize and develop over that part of the Gulf. And that's why I'm paying attention to it, because you are noticing a lot of convection starting to fire off on all cylinders across this region right here. That, as well as an approaching front, will be very interesting to see how those two collide and how that low pressure system kind of behaves with all that convection and all that instability in the region. So that's another factor that we're paying attention to as well. So now we can go ahead and kind of take a quick gander at the models and kind of see, okay, what do we think is going to happen and how is this going to pan out? And as we can go ahead and start, we're going to go ahead and start with the European, and we're going to just go ahead and zoom in a little bit into the Western Atlantic. The operational runs are still having a bit of a hard time trying to diagnose and trying to indicate where tropical development is and how this is going to pan out. And taking a quick look at this is the 2nd of July, this is the 3rd of July right here. As you're starting to notice the system trying to organize and develop, most likely it might be a low pressure system in the Gulf Coast and then develop over the Atlantic coast. That's kind of the most probable scenario at this current point. So the Europeans kind of having a hard time showing that right here, but I will go ahead and take a quick gander at the vorticity right here. Here's the 700 millibar vorticity. You're noticing that vorticity right here, starting to kind of hang around and kind of wrap around in the Gulf region as well. Although the European does, after a little bit of a while, does want this ultimately to kind of, at least either this is another area of vorticity or not, but it's having it head towards the Carolinas right there. We'll have to pay attention to that. That does seem a little bit odd, but watch this area right here to the east, because that's another area we're paying attention to, and we will talk more about in a second. But ultimately, the European vorticity is kind of a little iffy. Taking a look at it, you can't really tell which system is which from this. But ultimately, you can take a look at the ensemble runs right here, and they can kind of give you a better understanding of what kind of development might take place. And as you can see right here, at least from the 0Z European, primarily it appears that it's going to be developing, at least the more probable scenario of it developing, of it off the coast, the east coast of the United States right here. So if we do get a tropical development, if we do get a depression, we do get a tropical storm Chantal, it'll be along the eastern coast, kind of similar to what we saw. I know we saw probabilities increase in the Gulf region as well, but I do think as of right now, based on the fact that this system's gonna move over Florida, it's gonna be over land, and then it's gonna move over warm waters in the Gulf Stream. I do think it's gonna take some time to organize and develop before before it kind of gets designated. So that's why I'm leaning more so towards the East Coast scenario. Now looking at the other regions. Right here, going back to the North Atlantic view and moving this over a little bit to the right, just to kind of show you. Let's go ahead and pull up the GFS data as well. Here's the 0Z GFS data, not showing as much tropical development potential across parts of the Gulf and the East Coast like the European is. The European's really been leading the charge at this, but you can't really discount it either, because the GFS is 12Z. Or taking a look at that so far. This actually, never mind the 12Z from yesterday, but it is an uptick from that, so we'll have to pay attention to that going forward. And speaking of the GFS, let's go ahead and show you the GFS operational run right here. The operational run has a system moving into parts of the Gulf right there in the northeastern Gulf off the coast of Florida. Low pressure system starts to organize and develop. Then it becomes a pretty big flood threat across much of Florida. And then by July 8th, you start noticing kind of those contours and a potential low developing off the Carolina coast. But ultimately, the GFS doesn't have that much development happening. This is going to be one of those scenarios, in my opinion, that's similar to Barry. Models are going to be one thing, but conditions are a whole other ballpark, and we're going to want to pay attention to those conditions going forward. So that's kind of what the GFS has been showing as of late. Now let's go ahead and go to the Canadian run, because that's been showing some interesting stuff. The Canadian run is still holding strong for tropical development. Let's go ahead and pull this up, having the system starting to organize and develop off the Florida coast right here. Starting to notice that low pressure system move over Florida, and then you're starting to notice a much more defined low with closed contours along the east coast, about 102 hours out. And then you have the system really starting to increase in organization. But the CMC does want the system just to hover off the mid-Atlantic right here after moving east of the Carolinas. So that's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. But by and large, the CMC continues to be leading the charge. That and the European ensembles definitely have been the strongest showings of that. So we'll keep you updated on that here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. Now looking at the Icon run as well. Icon is also kind of interesting. So all the instability, all the energy moves in the Gulf region right here. Then it starts to move into the Atlantic coast, and the Icon still wants something to develop, but it's still favoring more of a westward shift, and it's going to be mainly over land this time over Florida right here. So the Icon's kind of not showing as much development because of those factors. So that's something to pay attention to. But like I said, pay attention to the real-time conditions and not the models for this setup, because this is a situation where the development and all the organization can escalate very quickly, especially at this time of year and especially in that part of the Gulf over there. So we'll have to pay attention to that going forward. But now we can go ahead and pivot over a little bit more because we are seeing some operational runs and ensemble indications of some other development happening in the Atlantic basin. So essentially the situation that we have right here is there's going to be some favorable vorticity and favorable conditions over in this part of the Atlantic to allow for a low pressure system to organize and develop over there. It won't really affect that much or anything like that if it does develop, but Bermuda definitely needs to pay attention to it going forward. And starting with the European, it really isn't showing as much. We're seeing a few closed contours and all of that stuff right here of a potential low developing, but by and large, while it does have some model and some ensemble support, you're kind of looking at this and you're, at least with the European, it's not as closed off as you'd like it to be, but we will pay attention to it. Actually, let's go, taking a quick look at that, let's go ahead and go to the EPS right here and go to the ensemble mean sea level pressure right here. We'll go ahead and go to the 0Z to show it more discreetly. But here's what we have going on, at least the 0Z European. Yeah, looking at this right here. The Europeans, interestingly, at least the ensembles don't really show as many as I was seeing previously, but you are seeing a few ensembles with power going on over there, so we'll have to pay attention to it. I know Weather Center Nazario is also kind of talking about this on his YouTube and on his social media and all of that, so that's kind of why I'm bringing it up in the first place, so we'll have to pay attention to that. But we have seen some operational runs at least show something over there. Taking a quick look at the GFS, having the system move through here, taking a quick gander in the long run. Interestingly, the GFS doesn't really have that much going on, although if we do go ahead and zoom out a little bit, as well, you are kind of noticing at least okay, never mind, that's a mid-latitude low right there and not a tropical low, but you do see potentially something happening over in this part of the subtropics right here. We'll have to see how that's derived and all of that, but I was paying attention to this and taking a look at the icon. This is where I noticed this as well. It's this system right here, over here, that with all the convection and all of that, that does start to close off its low and it starts to organize and potentially develop right here, starting about July 7th, July 8th over here. The icon gives it the most model support. I know the UK Met also did as well. And taking a look at the CMC, you're not showing it as pronounced right here, but the icon's generally been leading the charge in terms of the development happening over there. And I have seen some ensemble support indicating that. Thank you, Weather Center Nazario, for showing us that. So those are some things to pay attention to. And I will tell you this, the conditions over in that part of the Atlantic are not that bad for tropical development. Let's go ahead and start with the wind shear. I'm not even going to pull up the water temperatures because that's a constant at this point. But taking a quick look at this right here, they're not seeing that bad of a wind shear pattern over in this part of the Atlantic right here. You are seeing some fluctuative shear, of course, don't get me wrong, but where this is going to be at is it's going to be in a pocket of low wind shear that could allow for some tropical development to happen. And taking a quick look at the moisture very quickly, it's actually in a decent moisture pocket. Yes, there is some dry air that could potentially hinder its development right there, but it's not as pronounced and it's not as bad as I've seen in previous runs. And that uptrend in that model support continues to increase as the time continues to go on. And we could see another scenario where we have, say, maybe in the next couple of days, another area of interest tagged by the NHC. So that's another factor to pay attention to. We'll keep you updated on it. But now we're going to go ahead and get to the main stuff that I wanted to get to besides what's going on in Florida. And that is that I want to take a look at the conditions and go ahead and say, okay, it's a new month. Hurricane season's now entered July. We're looking at potential developments coming up sometime this month. When's it going to happen and where's it most likely? So here's the situation that we have right here. And we'll start with the SSTs. This is as of June 30th, but on this day when this is being marked and all of that, at least according to this, we're looking at the water temps across parts of the Atlantic Basin. That's extremely warm, no surprise there. Extremely warm in the Gulf region, no surprise there. The MDR is starting to turn up in terms of its temperatures. We're noticing more 29 degrees Celsius or 84 degree Fahrenheit contours across a few areas off the coast of Africa and in the middle of the MDR as well. There's a small spot right there. Expect that to continue to warm up. July is in the Atlantic is going to be the month that the waters warm up the most. And that's something to pay attention to. And we can go ahead and show you the climate reanalyzer as well to just to kind of refresh this and go to North Atlantic. The July temps are going to be the ones that July is going to be the month that where the temps are going to increase the most. And where we're at right now, as of June 30th, we're the third warmest temperatures in the North Atlantic in history after 2023 and 2024 at this current point. Continue to expect these water temps to surge, ladies and gentlemen. That's kind of the climatology of it, and that's kind of what we're meant to expect with this. So that's your water temps. Also, something to pay attention to is the ocean heat content. Ocean heat content continues to shift further and further and further up to the north, especially in this part of the Atlantic Basin over here, where the water temperature is really turning up and really warming up, and that warm water is also getting deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper as well. You're noticing all these pockets of 50 plus OHC right here. Those are going to increase, and those are going to merge into one big area of that, so you're going to want to pay attention to it. Also watching how much further to the north the OHC is moving now compared to where it was previously. That's going to be more in position for when tropical waves start to come off the coast of Africa and have a shot of development in the next couple of weeks. So that's also another factor to pay attention to. Looking at the wind shear once again, and we'll go ahead and shift over to that. Taking a look at that, go ahead and look at the wind shear. This is another kicker that we're going to have to pay attention to. The wind shear across the main development region and parts of the Atlantic Basin really starts to collapse and really starts to weaken as we get to the 9th, the 10th, the 11th, and 12th, and all of that. The only area of consistent strong wind shear is the Eastern Caribbean at this current point. And granted, this is typically expected at this current point. But what I am surprised about is just how favorable the conditions are getting in the main development region at this current point in time with wind shear alone. Not just that, but also the Northwestern Caribbean and the Gulf are starting to open up more. You're noticing the Atlantic Basin is a lot less sheared and a lot more fluctuative in terms of its shear pockets that's dealing with. So that's another factor to pay attention to as well. And as you continue to see this shear starting to decrease across much of the tropics, that's when the season starts to turn up. And in yesterday's video, at least in terms of the moisture, we were talking about some more of that Sahara dust potentially heading towards Europe towards the end of these model runs than not. So let's take a quick look at the European. Dry air continues to persist across parts of the MDR, but around 96 hours out, this is the 4th or 5th of July right here, you have a pretty big moisture plume across much of the main development region. Now, granted, the conditions aren't all going to be there for tropical development, although the European does have a low pressure system at least trying to do something right here. You're noticing it's designating it about 174 hours out, 168 hours out or so. So you're going to want to pay attention to that as well. And you're also noticing more and more of this moisture from the Sahel region coming off the coast of Africa. And you also are noticing a pretty big moisture pocket right here. This is what you're going to want to pay attention to as well. And looking at the Sahara dust over here, I'm noticing more of it is heading towards Spain and towards France. Over here, like the Iberian Peninsula, and then instead of heading towards the Atlantic. So that might be another scenario to pay attention to. And there is another Sahara dust area that's kind of impacting parts of Algeria, Mauritania, and Mali as well. We're going to have to pay attention to that around the 15th of July. That's when that's going on. But then you're taking a look at the anomalies right here. Precipitable water anomalies. You're looking at a far more moist environment than average across the board, across a lot of the Atlantic, and not just the MDR, but also the subtropics, also the Gulf region, also pretty much everywhere except for the Caribbean, which is to be expected because of the Sahara air layer. But by and large, the season is opening up more for business, and I do think starting around mid-July, watch the second week of July for tropical development, in my opinion, because that's when I think things are going to open up more, partially in parts of the Western Atlantic and the Gulf region where we see a few spin-ups, and partially in the MDR where we see more tropical waves come off and have a better chance of organization and development. These are all factors that we're going to be paying attention to for much of July, and these are all factors that we are going to continue to pay attention to here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and close the video out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. If you want to help out, hang out, or ask us some questions, be sure to join the Storms United Discord server. The link to that is in the end screen. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe. Here I am, rock you like a hurricane.